team. Labor has not exercised any control of spending. Last year, Safiotti's first budget saw spending growth over 10%, the highest level in the past 15 years outside COVID. The spending spree is coming at a time when householders have had to make cuts to be able to afford medical bills, the weekly shop and housing costs. The Premier recently suggested the inflation dragon had been slayed. WA farmers would find that an interesting take on what's happened to their household budgets and in their lives. The reality is that the recent years of 6 and 7% inflation, that's baked into the cost of things. The stuff we buy every week is now roughly 20% higher. Housing costs, rents and mortgage payments have jumped a lot more than that, and the inflation rate in WA is the highest in the nation. On top of the royalties and GST fix, Labor has been collecting record levels of revenue. Payroll tax at almost $5.9 billion and heading to $6.8 in the forward estimates. Transfer duty at $3.1 billion and motor vehicle taxes of more than $2.2 billion. The Liberal Party has argued that this once-in-a-lifetime revenue boom should have been spent in areas such as health, housing, law and order and cost of living relief and restoring regional services. The Liberal Party has committed to tax cuts and a greater emphasis on economic reform going forward. We have made a cut to payroll tax. It's a start and much more needs to be done. Why? Because, as I've just said, the state government will collect almost $5.9 billion in payroll tax this financial year. A Liberal government will cut stamp duty for first home buyers and give a rebate for downsizers to free up housing. We've also committed to cutting Labor's emergency measure electricity tax, which was introduced when they first came to power. This $676 million measure is a permanent cost of living relief for families. The Liberal Party is also committed to rebuilding capacity in our health system, which has been stretched to breaking under Labor. We also have a plan to address the alarming rise in crime in Western Australia with a suite of policies to put more officers on the beat while supporting our police force. Now, all the issues I've just discussed, the impact is even greater in regional Western Australia. And as a regional member, head works are more expensive, crime stats are worse, rentals are harder to find and healthcare is more difficult to access, and good luck finding a builder or a skilled tradie in a hurry. We believe these are the priorities that matter to Western Australians. Budgets are about picking priorities, and we have real solutions to health, to housing, to cost of living, law and order and regional services, areas Labor have neglected. Now, what I'd like to now do is to go through with a slide presentation some of our key areas, those 5 priority areas that I've mentioned, and just outline some of our specific projects that we'll deal with. And cost of living is the first area that I'd like to discuss. So, as you'd be well aware, cost of living is a key issue for West Australians. It's the front of mind for people, and our response has been the electricity tax is a significant cut to Labor's tax. They brought that in as an emergency measure. The emergency didn't go away, and our response is to actually cut that tax. We've seen what's happened to the weekly shop. That shopping trolley is nowhere near as full as if you're spending the same amount of dollars. We've paid attention to cost of living issues for seniors. We're doubling the seniors rebate. We're doing some stuff for grandcarers support schemes and other issues. And housing, of course, which I'll discuss later, is a key cost of living impact as well. In health, now, ambulance ramping is a symptom of what's been happening in our health system. Now, the Premier, Roger Cook, when he was the health shadow in opposition, said 1,000 hours was a crisis. And we know what's happened since. We've got off to a terrible start in 2025 with January and February. 6,000 hours is now apparently the norm under this government, and they have run out of ideas and solutions. So it would be no surprise, given that we are led by Libby Medham, who has taken on this challenge as the Shadow Health Minister as well, that health is a key focus for us. Again, as a regional member, I'm proud to mention our Regional Health Development Initiative, which has some wonderful things for the accessing healthcare in the regions. The Joondalup Health Campus will turn on those 2 wards. And of course, women's and babies, although it's not listed in our commitments, will be a key part of that as well. Now, onto housing. we have a housing affordability and availability crisis in Western Australia, and this is a key focus of our promises and commitments and policies that we've brought forward to this election. The only way out of this is to address supply. And the state government, only in the last couple of years, by the way, have focused a lot of attention on the social housing side of this solution. We know in the first term of the McGowan government they completely ignored social housing. We were investing less than Tasmania, which was just ludicrous. They've woken up and they have done small things in social housing. The private market is what will drive us out of this housing crisis, and we simply have to address the supply side of this and unlock more housing. And our infrastructure funds, metro and regional, are designed to bring more housing blocks to the market. We've got some work. We've done some work again around downsizing for seniors who might not be keen to get out of that 4x2 into something more appropriate because of the stamp duty issue. So we've addressed that as well. And there is one in there as well I want to touch on. Grow housing. If we're having a hard time attracting police, teachers and nurses to regional Western Australia because of lack of housing, it's appropriate that we respond and put some money into the Grow Housing program. On to crime and law and order. Our Shadow Police Minister, Peter Collier, has done some outstanding work putting together these policies, and this is an area where we haven't actually seen much effort from Labor, I have to say, which is a surprise. So what we're doing is, through overtime provisions, we are bringing extra police onto the beat, and we will recruit 500 police over the first term. The Labor government have made enormous promises about what they would do with recruiting police, and they have failed to do that, and police are leaving the force in droves. So some of our policies are about not only attracting them but retaining them. So police welfare is front of our mind as well. Now, there's a couple of other areas. So local electorate commitments, these have been driven by candidates interacting with the community and telling us what's needed on the ground, and we've responded. On to the next slide. So other commitments, there is a transport commitment. Again, it won't be a surprise to you, I think, that our transport commitments perhaps aren't as generous as the Labor Party have done over the last 8 years. We've seen what they've done with Metronet. It's been the sole focus. It's crowded out workers from the building sector, for example. So we have done some work in transport, and I did want to touch on some of the other things around speech pathology and early childhood education and support. Really difficult to get specialised speech pathologists and other people, so we have responded to that. The next slide indicates our priorities as a percentage of our commitments, and those numbers speak for themselves, and I think that demonstrates the focus on our 5 priority areas. And this last slide actually aggregates the regional spend, but these amounts are actually captured in the other buckets that I've discussed. But there is one in there I will mention. We've just come through a very, very tough year on our roads, metro and regional. But you will know that disproportionately regional drivers are much more likely to be killed or seriously injured. So our high-speed local regional road safety program, I'm very proud that we've brought that to voters. Now onto some savings measures. We thought it was appropriate that to keep our commitments to a manageable level and to keep the impact on debt to a manageable level, that we do find some savings, and they're outlined for you there. I will just go into some more detail briefly on some of those. I'm sure there'll be some questions. So the Swan River Ferry Service expansion, it's simply not a priority of ours given what we're facing in Western Australia at the moment. West Australians are telling us that it's cost of living, health, housing, law and order, and fixing regional services. So the Swan River Ferry Service we won't be dealing with in our first term of government. We will be having a 1-year delay on the Canning Bridge bus interchange. It'll still be delivered in the first term, but we're pushing that out to deal with some of those urgent priorities earlier in the term. The provision for Metronet projects under development. This is referred to in the budget as funding will be allocated to specific projects upon completion of tender processes and final investment decisions. That means they haven't been made. Therefore, we're going to take that $191.1 billion and take that off our debt. the review of plans for the deferred new metropolitan facility. So you'd be aware that in 2022, I think it was, then Agricultural Minister Alana McTiernan made the announcement that there'd be a $320 million facility built at Murdoch. Mid to late 2024, it was announced that that move was not happening, and that money has been allocated in the budget. Now, I had a briefing from the Ag Department in the lead-up during the caretakers, and it's quite clear that they have other priorities at the moment that they are dealing with, and I think it's a more realistic time frame to suggest that finding a site, getting the planning done, the business case for the new facility will occur later in the first term. So we are not pushing this out. I don't think this will be ready to go until what we've suggested in our budget. So there's $123.9 million saving there. Again, in the PFPS, we have some yet to be announced decisions provision. That's interesting language, but what that means is the Labor Party have put a certain amount of money in a bucket, and they haven't told us what it's for. So we will be taking that money and that $109.9 million and paying that off debt. Some smaller ones: rationalisation of government advertising and consultants. It's a trend that as a government first arrives, they're more perhaps rigorous with their attitude to spending, but over time the list of consultants, the list of advertising grows. We've all seen the lovely red Metronet ads, so we'll be making a $30 million cut to consultants and government advertising. The WA Canberra hub, I think Batman thought this was a great idea. It's not, so we'll be cutting the Canberra hub. And finally, the Environmental Defenders Office. This organisation are playing a key role in slowing down the massive Scarborough expansion of Woodsides. It's not appropriate that a state government fund them, and we won't be. Now, so the next slide is about the impact of our election commitments, and you'll notice that we do remain in what's a healthy surplus. It's a conservative set of numbers we put forward, and the surplus remains, and the net debt impact over the forward estimates runs out to slightly over $41 billion by 27-28. Now, you heard from the Treasurer, Rita Saffiota, yesterday, and I think she was reported in the paper this morning as saying that in a conversation, I'm assuming with this similar group, that there were no identified spending risks in Labor's forward estimates. We did hear from the Treasurer a little while ago about the freight rail network buyback, and I guess some of us assumed that given the timing of that announcement, it might have been a thought bubble, and it might have been something that she was just flagging. But Labor have been campaigning recklessly and not letting Western Australians know what this will cost, and we see that in the some of the media. WA Labor's freight rail plan to deliver massive benefits for Albany and Great Southern communities. So assuming this is all in lovely red and white, so this is a campaign commitment for this election. So you would have assumed they'd let us know how much and when, but this is clearly happening soon. And as recently as yesterday, I believe, or the day before, the Premier was in Albany, and I'll quote from his Facebook page: "And we'll bring our freight rail network back into public hands to support our farmers for the future." So this is not a thought bubble. This is not in the never never. This is happening. They're out campaigning on something. And now let's get to what the identified spending risk is. And the previous slide was not something we'd made up. This is from the Treasury. The Treasury had identified this as a spending risk. And now we've had Labor campaigning relentlessly for the last couple of weeks on this. So we've heard from industry that it's potentially $5 billion, as high as $8 billion. Now, obviously, when you have one seller and one buyer, the seller is keen to talk up the price, and there might be a bit of that in the $5 to $8 billion conversation that's going on. But we do not know. We do not know. Is that hanging over our heads? Because, from my rough maths, that one project could be greater than all of our commitments combined, and it's somewhere out in the ether, and we don't know what's happening. So I just thought I'd flag that at this stage. So, questions?
Who did your costings?
Sorry?
Who did your costings?
Peter Conran did our costings, Jeff.
Are they qualified in this area? You are not to pesky or dismiss it, but are they qualified purely qualified to do these sort of government budget costings?
Is Peter Conran qualified? A man of vast experience, 30 years experience at the highest level of the public sector in Western Australia, Canberra and the Northern Territory. So he's definitely qualified. We were actually pleased that he did this on our behalf. To have someone of that reputation, that experience was absolutely crucial.
What prosecution of the figures did he do? Is this just a tallying up of the numbers you provided?
No, it's... Sorry,
Did he
Dylan.
come back to you with data to say, I think this is wrong?
So there was, as you'd imagine, there was a rigorous exchange of views between Peter and our team, our small team, and he has a letter which we'll provide to you outlining exactly what he's done. So he hasn't just added up the numbers. No, this is, and I'll quote from the letter, he's examined the rationale provided on the costings for individual policy proposals. So it's not just a tick and flick. You wouldn't expect someone of Peter Conran's stature to sign something if he hasn't done this properly, and we are confident that's been the case.
What were some of the costings that you had data over? What were the ones that...
I mean, when you're dealing with this many policies and this much information, and Peter came to it when he did, there's going to be a normal amount of back and forth about making sure he's got the data in an appropriate form and that he's happy with it.
Even if you went to an accountancy firm, there'd be more than one person working on that, checking each other's works. You only relied on one man?
We've relied on someone with 30 years' experience at the highest level of a public
but
service.
one man.
One person, Mr. Peter Conran AM, has done the costings on our behalf. So
he's verified his own findings. There's no independent verification of his findings. He's done it himself. Is that right?
I'm not sure how far you'd want to go. Would we want someone to verify the verifier? So no, it's one. It's one individual. Peter Conran has done the verification of our costings.
Did he have a team around him to go into the data, or is he just are you just relying on?
I'm not sure whether Peter has sought external advice, but we were dealing with Peter Conran exclusively.
But when did Peter Conran last work in the public sector?
Oh, I'm not sure. I'm guessing in the late teens, so maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I actually don't know, but recently. Yeah. If you're saying he's anyway, I'll leave it there.
I'm just saying.
I'll find out for you. Actually, I don't know, Dylan. It's a good question.
Did everything that you went out and announced with the costings in each individual announcement, did all of those announcements go to Conran?
So what Peter he didn't he did the maths on the whole package, but the things like the smaller commitments, the 50 grand for netball court lights or those sorts of projects, no, he didn't.
What figure did he draw the line at? What was the cut-off point?
I think it was more candidate commitments and the small commitments. I don't know there was a dollar figure.
So all the candidate commitments, they're all uncosted?
No, they're absolutely costed, but he's relying on the information that's been provided, for example, from local governments, from sporting clubs in that process.
What data did he rely upon to cost this? He's been out of the public service now for 8 years.
Yeah.
Is that an appropriate source of information? Almost 9 years. Is that an appropriate source of information to rely upon someone who hasn't been doing this day to day for the better part of a decade?
We believe it is.
What gives you that confidence?
His enormous experience and reputation in the public service at the highest level in Western Australia, in the Northern Territory, and in and in Canberra. I'm sorry, hang on. Sorry, yeah.
He worked for Morrison and Howard for a time, didn't he?
I believe he worked for Prime Minister Howard.
And Scott Morrison.
I'm unclear about the last.
So just the reason I say that, does that...
If it was 2018,
I think it was,
Out of the state public sector.
one of you is wrong. So.
okay, but that's fine. But does that indicate, or does that call into question his independence?
Sorry, Jeff.
In terms of if he's worked for the Liberals, I think Colin Barnett referred to him as more leaning to a Liberal, to the Liberal side of things. So what he said, does that draw?
And I think they do an outstanding job, and I respect their independence. Peter Conran had 30 years of experience in this field, and you might question his independence. I certainly can't count, but we are very confident that what we're putting in front of you is the accurate costings. And just on that, by the way, so on the costings process, and we did cop a bit of stick from the Labor Party and particularly the Treasurer, and Treasury's costing process, I think the cut-off date was February the 28th. Was it Tuesday, Dylan, that the Premier announced $560 million of projects, which is well after February the 28th. So I would take with a very large grain of salt figures supplied by the Labor Party about our costings.
Why haven't you included the costings on the Women's and Babies Hospital? Doesn't that undermine the criticism of Labor and the rail buyback?
Women's and Babies is in the budget.
But you said it wasn't costed, though.
It's not an election commitment from us. It's already in the budget. There's almost $1.8 billion in the budget.
But the business case suggests there's a $200 million black hole for the cost of building in the Netherlands compared to Murdoch.
Yeah.
It's more expensive to build in Netherlands, isn't it?
So it is a very significant project, and we are committed to build. This is going to be a 10-year build, and it will be for the future of Western Australia's health system for decades and decades and decades. There is nearly $1.8 billion in the budget right now, and I hope I've explained that why it's there. And we have to first. There's a contract in place for the other location. We'll be tearing that up and starting again. We'll be going through the process, site selection, etc. In our first term, we will start immediately on that process, and $1.8 billion that's in the budget will get us to the first term. The final cost, it would be rash of me to tell you exactly what that hospital will cost over that 10-year build, but there's $1.8 billion allocated right now.
May I ask about
Have I explained that okay?
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me, though, that it's always going to cost more to do the process you're talking about doing than sticking with the existing one, right? There's got to be a cost in there, so don't you need to come clean?
I don't think it's a matter of coming clean. I think we are acknowledging that this is a difficult build, but you're putting at risk babies. And to get it right, it might cost a few more dollars. But it's really, really important to get it right. And that's what we're going to do. That's what we've committed to do.
Well, I think our question is, in this costings press conference, what is the value of that few more dollars? Shouldn't you have done the math on that?
We are at the very start of this process with the trial location of this hospital at QE2. There's $1.8 billion, almost $1.8 billion allocated in the budget, and it's a major piece of infrastructure. It's an expensive piece of infrastructure, but what's really important for the future of healthcare in Western Australia is to get it in the right location and get the build done in the time frame that's been allocated to it.
So it's an open check on that one?
I think that's a vast exaggeration of
Well,
what...
you don't know what the price is, so you're admitting it yourself. You don't know.
The price, the money that's allocated in the budget is $1.8 billion.
Yeah, but you're saying to move it, you've acknowledged that there's a bigger cost to build it at Netherlands.
I'm suggesting
Don't know
that
what that is.
I'm suggesting that Netherlands is a complicated build. We're aware of that. Our focus is entirely on getting it right. The $1.8 billion might not cover the entire cost of the Women's and Babies Hospital, but it will be, in comparison to a Metronet blowout from $3 billion to $13, it will be a very, very small amount of money for a very, very important purpose.
Is it possible to bring the health slide up again? There was a second slide that I didn't get.
Sorry, there was. You want the second one?
Yeah, the
yes,
second one,
please.
because I think you only listed $5 million for the Royal Perth Hospital
Yeah.
upgrade. You
Yeah.
promised 80. What's the discrepancy?
So what you're looking at is the forward estimates. The 80's in the fourth year.
Okay, and so that's obviously a much bigger project. You've also promised a plan for Peel. Are you confident you can build what is effectively 3 large-scale metropolitan hospitals within the next decade?
What we're promising for Royal Perth will actually be determined out of that Royal Commission process. That's almost like a scoping strategy for what healthcare needs we need in Western Australia to meet the next 50 years. So we'll see what Royal Perth looks like after we've done that Royal Commission and after we've put forward a proper business case. It is a significant task, but we are starting Women's and Babies as soon as we can, and then we will roll out Royal Perth starting in the second term.
So the time frame on Royal Perth, that 80 million, 75 of that is in the second term.
No. Forward estimates are the first 3 years of a second term.
75 is in 28, 29.
Correct.
And so what's the timeframe for Royal Perth after that?
Until that scoping study's completed and the Royal Commission's done its work on it, it's almost impossible to tell. They might come back to us and say we're 200 beds short, or we're 100 beds short, or Royal Perth needs to be X instead of Y. So I think it's premature, other than we have a commitment that recognises the need to get that project started. At this stage, I think it's way too...
Cuts to those
Yeah.
programs.
That's a good point. There are a significant number of road and rail projects that are underway, and obviously we'll be completing them.
Okay, so they won't be done halfway, or they won't be.
I don't think we'll be stopping a road halfway to anywhere.
And just last question about Peter. I think back in 2008, Colin Barnett says he has a bit of a more liberal leaning, but so what? Do you believe that he's politically unbiased when he delivered those comments?
I think if you rise to the heights of the public service that Peter Conran did, vast experience, enormous reputation. So no, I think that would be a slur on his reputation to suggest he's biased in making decisions.
How was he selected?
Sorry?
What was the process of selection?
Yeah, so we did toss a few names around. His name was mentioned, and we approached him, and we were delighted that he that was able to complete the process for us.
Whose other names were tossed around?
That's entirely up to us to.
Were there companies or was it individuals?
We looked at a number of options, and we're very satisfied with the one we took.
Your would-be partner in government, Shane Love, says that he's exposed $2 billion in discrepancies between Labor's public announcements and what was submitted to Treasury, describing it as an egregious attempt to mislead WA voters. Have you on your own look at Labor's numbers and do your...
I've, not unsurprisingly, in the last couple of weeks, just been entirely focused on our numbers. I've no comment on what Shane said.
On the deeper office
Yeah.
savings there, I mean, that existing office is riddled with asbestos, isn't it? So what should people who are working in that facility be thinking about the future, given the money you're pulling from that project?
It's my understanding, and I want to check this, I don't think there's anybody working in that asbestos-riddled building. So they have Nash Street, and then they have people actually working from home, and they have recently announced an $80 million, I believe, biosecurity. So I think the one in Kensington is virtually empty. That asbestos risk was identified.
There needs to be steps taken, though, to find a permanent home, though, doesn't there? Or
Well, absolutely there does, and I think every single one of those staff that were either in rented accommodation or leased accommodation or dongers were absolutely looking forward to Murdoch. Now, I don't know what happened to Murdoch, and I'm getting off track a bit, but I'm a little surprised that seemed to appear and disappear, and nobody seemed too concerned. So Alana McTiernan said the future of agriculture in Western Australia is secure. We've got Murdoch. $320 million. They're all out there for the photograph. 2 years later, nothing had happened, although it was in the Murdoch annual report that it's coming. And then suddenly it's not fit for purpose. There's 11 hectares at Murdoch, and they said it wasn't big enough. So we have a task to do to find a suitable site that will meet their needs. But I think our timing is realistic.
it has to be done with $180 million less, though, under your...
No, it's about timing. So these are the forward estimates for the first 3 years. I think it's unrealistic to spend more than what we've allocated in that 3 years. So it's being done for the original 320, but it'll take longer because we're starting from scratch. When they announced Murdoch was not the site, I think it was mid to late last year, it's ground to a halt. No site's been identified. So we are...
Have you, sorry, I'm really...
Okay.
No, I have one, but that was going.
Yeah.
Have you included the cost of the 300 megawatt gas?
We have, yes, we have.
In the forward estimates that's planned to start in 2023?
Again, that's one where there's some of it in the last year of the forward estimates, and the rest of that is in the out years.
So you're still planning to build one?
Absolutely. This state desperately needs more baseload gas. We are careering towards 2030, and governments can move glacially. And I think, were we unfortunate enough not to win on the weekend, I'll make a prediction that very early, and I hope this is not the case, I do hope we win, but very early in their next term, you might see the Labor Party saying, oh, gee, that gas is a good idea. So keep an eye on that one, but we badly need that gas, and it will, and as you're aware, we've made some comments about that. But no, that's happening in the time frame.
Have you included the cost of continuing to run Muja and
that would be in the budget because that's happening under
You said
Labor
you
now.
want to extend the lifespan, so that would have.
Not in the forward estimates. In the forward estimates, Labor aren't doing anything about shutting off Collie until 2030. Our forward estimates go till 7-8.
Have you got an idea of what the cost would be though?
More than it should be if they're running it properly.
There's been plenty of back and forth on when we get these costings.
Yep.
Are you comfortable less than 48 hours from the election day that you're handing this out when hundreds of thousands of people
Yeah.
cast their vote?
It's a good point, and we've given this a bit of thought. So, as we've announced policies, and we started doing this, I think I was doing a housing announcement in November. We explained to West Australians exactly what that housing policy would cost, and we've done that every single time we've gone out. That's not what you've heard about the freight railway buyback, by the way, but we have done that. And again, I think we had 560 million announced on Tuesday from the Labor Party. So, as far as voters are concerned, I don't think they're particularly engaged about whether it's Treasury or Peter Conran. But I do think there's a case to be made clearly for an independent budget office. And that wouldn't just exist for the caretaker period. That would be available to members of Parliament, to the opposition, for the entirety of the Parliament. Because what I've noticed is a bit of a trend over the last couple of years. We ask questions in the Parliament, and that's a good source of information. That information starts to dry up as you get closer to elections. Those answers to questions are more vague, or they don't occur at all, and the government starts starving us of the information we need to make our policy decision. So I think an independent budget office, which the Labor Party thought was a great idea, Mark McGowan's on the record as saying it's a great idea. I don't trust Treasury, we need an independent budget office. They get in the government and they say, oh, hang on about that, I'm not sure about that. We are firmly committed to funding and supporting an independent budget office. It's vital.
Do you allocate funds in the costings?
No, we haven't. I have no idea what it would cost, but it's a very useful thing. It's clearly needed, and to your point, it does take away that back and forth that goes on at every election. What we're doing is perfectly normal. The Labor Party did it, we did it. The independent budget office would make that go away. And the other bit I was going to get to, I think you're about, because of what's happened with pre-poll voting, and this is just me, this is not the Liberal Party, I think you'd almost want to be starting to draw a line in no more announcements and costings off to the independent budget office. I would actually shorten pre-poll to a week, and I'd have that cut off a week out.
Why not lead by example then? Why not do that? Why didn't you do that this time?
Do what?
Announce, have your costings out there. And
Because there's no independent budget office. No, there's not.
But you're obviously proud enough of Peter Conran's work.
Yep.
Why didn't this happen earlier?
Well, we were rolling out policies. The Labor Party are rolling out policies right to the end, and that's the issue with pre-poll. 560 million on Tuesday from them. We were doing things as late as the weekend and Monday, so I think there's a bit of a disconnect between parties campaigning and making financial announcements right up to the end after, as you said, people vote.
On your
Can I just
presentation,
confirm that there's no cuts, there's no planned cuts of public service? There's no staff that are going to...
No, there's not. In fact, we're adding police and we're offering overtime provisions to police, which, no, there's not.
on your presentations, your costings are less than your alliance partner, the Nationals. How do you accommodate their promises of getting government?
What I'm presenting today, Jeff, is the Liberal Party budget costings.
Yes, but it is less than what the Nationals are offering, and if you go into an alliance, what do you do?
I can't deal with hypotheticals. This is the Liberal Party process. I'm encouraging everyone who thinks these are great policy and costing announcements to vote Liberal, and hopefully.
Public along the falls by suggesting it's not?
I think the public are very. I think you're taking the public for granted. We're offering a very clear alternative. In fact, they're running in city seats. We're running in seats all over Western Australia. I think they've made it clear that they're running in their own right, and we absolutely are. We're running to win in our own right, and what I've presented are the Liberal Party costings.
Which may not see the light of day in the end, because you would go into, it's expected you were going to an alliance, so something's got to give. It's either yours or theirs.
Yeah. So
It's not hypothetical.
I'm
Well, it's hypothetical that you might win, but it's not hypothetical that you're going to have to ditch some of what you're saying here.
what I've presented is what we have presented to the public of Western Australia to convince voters to vote Liberal. If enough of them agree with me, we're a chance to form government on Saturday, and that's what I'm dealing with today.
What's giving you the confidence? What's giving you the confidence to ditch the $110 million in decisions taken but not yet announced?
Well,
Given you don't know what they are.
it's very clear. We're waiting on tenders and business cases. The business cases haven't.
This is the PFPS budget.
Just let me get back to that if you don't mind. I'll get back to that one.
There's been $109 million of decisions taken. and not
Just
announced.
if you don't mind, give me a second. The 109.
What's giving you the confidence to say blindly we're going to cut that?
So it says here in the PFPS it was stated there were some projects have been fully or partially funded. There are unallocated funds remaining in this provision. It's unallocated funds. That clearly means it's not been allocated. We wouldn't get halfway through a road or something. So yeah.
The advertising spend, you weren't a fan of the Paint Ellenbrook Wine Red campaign?
I try to be unbiased in this position, Hamish, but no, I think that was gratuitous political advertising, and the public saw it for what it is. And that's not a wonderful use of taxpayers' funds, and that's what we're dealing with here. This is important stuff, and that was political advertising.
You did say that governments often start out rigorously, careful on advertising spend, but then it kind of blows out at the end. If you form government, is that something that your government will rein in, that advertising spend?
If we win government, and if I'm the Shadow Treasurer in coming years, and you see a blue something great to be on the lip, you ring me and remind me, because that won't happen under my watch. I guarantee you. I knew what that was. The public of Western Australia knew what that was.
You talked about increasing spending growth under Labor of 10%. What would you do to cut that spending growth? What would you cut?
So there are impacts of what we've done, and I think the Treasurer spoke about this yesterday. So recurrent spending over the forward estimates, there is an impact from our commitments of $3.646 billion. And in the next couple of years, the spending growth nowhere near matches what we've seen in the last year. So it's 2.8% under our numbers in 25-26. So we'll see a pullback on that. What we are dealing with, sadly, is despite the GST fix and the rivers of gold from the iron ore sector, we have some problems to fix. We are short of police. It's difficult to get teachers, particularly in the regions, and our healthcare system, as you well know, is in trouble. So we make no apologies for addressing those priorities, particularly early in our first term.
Are you concerned that the government may potentially look at building a circle line in Metronet over the next 4 years?
Well, I'm concerned. Anything with the word Metronet in it gives me the shudders, and it should alarm Western Australians. But here we are again. So we had Rogers rugby team a couple of weeks ago, and somewhere between $100 and $300 million, and he was annoyed that it had leaked from Sydney. But that meant it was real, but he was annoyed. And now a couple of weeks later, as we get closer, and he's getting some feedback about that, suddenly no cash from WA, and I note what he said. He said no cash. That might mean in kind. So we had the rugby league debacle, and now we had the freight rail buyback, billions and billions of dollars, and now on the eve of the election we have Metronet Stage 2. So no, I think the Treasurer, who is also the Transport Minister, needs to take a cold shower and calm down and fix health, fix housing, fix regional services, and look at law and order. Where was the police policy from Labor in this election? I mean, it's still only nearly midday on Thursday, so maybe tomorrow.
Will there be any, just lastly, would you have any ideas of Row 8, Row 9, where there's no mention about that yet? Are you still committed to it, or inside that, or?
I believe we've moved on from, I believe it's an A-class reserve.
So
No, you wouldn't
so you won't be
challenge that.
exploring that?
No.
The Shelley Bridge duplication project,
Yeah.
you've got, I think it's 70 million.
Yeah.
I think the time frame's longer than that. that's reliant on 50% federal money.
Yes, it is, and we definitely have to do some arm twisting to get that important bit of infrastructure across the line. That's contingent on federal funding.
The county regions change is also pretty important. Why are you delaying that year?
Yeah, again, it's about our priorities, and we're quite unashamed about that. It's health, housing, and so on. It's just for 1 year. That project will be completed in the first term. Just give me.
Is that just a bit of? Sorry, whose phone's going?
I'm not contagious, by the way. I've just got.
Yeah.
Sorry, Hamish.
Is that just a bit of budgetary gymnastics by, you're just kind of putting that extra year outside of the forward estimates?
No, it's about dealing with our priorities that are more urgent. That's an important bit of infrastructure, absolutely, and it'll be done in the first term. It's just being pushed out a year.
Your Rockingham candidate's committed to a Rockingham arena. Has that been costed?
That would be one of the local candidate commitments. I believe that would have been done with. I don't have that one in front of me. Obviously, I can find some information about that, about the actual process and whose numbers we've been relying on. I assume local governments and other things. And just on that, on those commitments, I think it's important to say that our commitment to those sorts of projects is firm. If the local government blow it out and spend more than they should, that's up to them and the sporting clubs involved. Our contribution to that commitment would be firm.
Are you comfortable, though, that your candidates will stand for
But they're really important, and candidates are best placed to identify them with interaction with their local communities. And I think in a state as wealthy as ours, those sorts of contributions are very, very important and useful.
Those sorts of projects, 50 grand to resurface courts, ask any home renovator at the moment, they're also experiencing blowouts.
Yep.
I know you've said that you won't,
Yep.
the money set aside is firm, but you're opening yourself up for a lot of headaches with local governments knocking on the door when those projects do blow out.
I think the people that were giving us the information about what these projects will cost are aware of what's happened with escalating costs in recent years. So no, I'm comfortable with what we received and what we've committed to those projects. I think importantly, the Auditor-General did some work on this after the last election and the Labor's smaller commitments, and it wasn't necessarily about the sort of commitment. It was about the auditing process and the acquittal process, and that's something that I thought that was a good report, and that was something we would look closely at, just to make sure that we give a local government a certain amount of money, it goes exactly where we said it would, and that's something we'd follow through with.
And Peter, how long did Peter have to scrutinise these commitments?
I'm not exactly sure of the initial time, but he certainly had adequate time.
A fortnight, a week?
I think it was. Let me just double check that. Can I get back to you on that? I don't have that date in front of me, but it was a reasonable amount of time. Thanks.
When did you actually formalise an agreement with him to?
Again, I'll have to get you the date. Yeah.
Can I ask you about some of the AMA WA's calling for radiation clinic to provide free service in Midland?
I'm sorry. I believe Libby might be doing issues of the day later. That's really something. Has that happened today? Yeah. I'm sorry. I might have to pass on that.
Are you planning to release all this data to us?
You'll certainly have the slideshow. You'll have the Conran letter. You'll have some other information about individual policies.
And the breakdown of what the impact on state finance?
Absolutely. Yeah. All right, guys. If there's no more, I'll talk anyway. Okay. Thank you very much for coming. Enjoy the rest of the election campaign, and you'll be rolling straight into a federal one in a couple of days.
We'll do issues of the day, but we'll take it downstairs.
If that's okay.